Sweet home, Santa Barbara, where the skies are so blue. Sweet home, Santa Barbara, what's worked for me can work for you.
Welcome, friends, to Sweet Home Santa Barbara. I'm your co-host, Jonathan Robinson. I'm with my realtor and friend and co-host,
Scott Williams. Hi, Jonathan.
Hi there. Well, today we have a guest I'm excited to interview because he has a lot of interesting information about electric and solar and all kinds of stuff. Let me do a brief bio of Tony Miller. Tony works for a company called Electriq Power that makes backup batteries, and he's the regional manager for enrollments in the Santa Barbara Home Power Program, which is kind of a unique program aimed to solve elements of the SB City Strategic Energy Plan through the installation of end-to-end solutions and solar and backup battery microgrids for residential homes. I'm sure he'll go more into depth about what he does and how it applies to not only the city of Santa Barbara, but potentially to you. And I want to welcome you to Sweet Home Santa Barbara. Tony, welcome.
Thank you, Jonathan. I'm very pleased to be here. Nice to see you, Scott.
Where do we begin, Scott? What's your first question?
Well, for me, solar has always been this interesting thing, but I recently bought a house that has solar panels on it, so it's now become personal. Tony, why don't you talk to us a little bit about, people see them on people's roofs, and, I suppose people must ask themselves about solar, putting solar panels on their own house. What works? What should people know about this?
Essentially, what it does do is provides power for you, renewable power for you during the daytime through the generation from the solar panels. And then the battery is storing some of that power, and then it's deploying power into your home or back onto the grid in the evening time, so that you are able to use renewable power during that later time in the day when renewable power otherwise wouldn't be able to be produced, and when otherwise a homeowner would have to buy power from the utility, and they're going to use fossil fuels to produce and distribute power to your home. So it is doing its job of providing a full end-to-end renewable solution that helps you at your home reduce and control your cost for power, gives you the ability to use stored power when it's an emergency or when it's an inconvenience for you. And it helps everyone in the community by offering a way to meet all of our goals for renewable energy.
Yeah, to me, it was kind of a surprise because it was included with the house. But I suppose a lot of people don't have this on their homes and have got to be thinking, should I actually add solar panels onto my house?
The most common question we get, one of many, is will solar work on my home? And every home is unique, and we're going to always look at every home with the opportunity to think that it will work. Definitely talk to an expert before you assume it won't work. We certainly prefer certain conditions and roof types, and really you can boil this down to two simple questions to try and figure out what the solar readiness of your home is. Is it up to code? For example, do you have California shake on your roof, or do you have the actual, composite shingle or a standing seam metal roof or concrete tiles? Because California shake would not be current code. We cannot install on that, but we can install on a roof that is composite shingle and or concrete tile. Can roofers walk on your roof without damaging the tiles? That's another great simple question to ask yourself, because if they cannot, then that means your roof is really going to be uninstallable as it is, because it's going to have fragile tiles, and there's going to be extra work and labor involved to prepare your roof in order to install the solar panels there. So if you want to avoid the extra costs, then, you know, it's great if you have a composite shingle roof, otherwise known as asphalt, standing seam metal, or concrete tile. Tree shade is a condition that we look at as well. And, you know, south facing, west facing, east facing in that order are the ideal roof planes. As long as you have one or two of those available and not full shade on those roofs, then we're going to be able to generate some renewable power from there.
I'm wondering, Tony, what it costs them, say, an average house, and what's the return on investment? How long does that take?
That's a good question, Jonathan. You know, it really comes down to, obviously, like, what is that investment that you're making? And there's basically two avenues a homeowner can go down for acquiring a solar system or solar and backup battery system. You can either buy a system, which means you're going to spend cash up front, or you're going to get bank financing to pay for that system. Or you can use a third-party financing instrument where you don't own the system, but you're buying the power that the system produces. So if you buy the system, that means that you have all of the cost of ownership, and you're buying a depreciating asset. You're buying something that has certain warranties attached to it that are going to last different amounts of time for different parts of the equipment. And you are buying all of that responsibility in terms of replacing a battery that's only built to cycle 3,650 times, which is 10 years. You're buying the inverter that's going to need to be replaced during the useful life of your system, which is 25 to 30 years. And you're buying all the operational and maintenance costs that come with that, which will be somewhere in the neighborhood of a few $1,000s over the life of a system. Mm-hmm. So if you're going that route, you're looking at a payback route, and that's what you were describing. And so if a system costs $40,000 and you spend $3,000 a year on power, then you would divide 40,000 divided by 3, and you can see that it's going to take you 13 and a half years to pay yourself back. Now, that's not including any of the additional costs, the replacement costs, the operational and maintenance costs. On the other hand, if you choose to avoid the cost of ownership and have a third-party financing instrument in place that doesn't have to be a debt instrument, called a power purchase agreement, and this is actually the most common way for getting a system on your home at no upfront cost today. It's how we do it in our very unique program that's city supported called the Santa Barbara Home Power Program. You can have a 25-year service agreement that covers bumper to bumper all of the operational, maintenance, or replacement costs. And it really boils down to being more of a cash flow model, a positive cash flow model. You take, what are you spending today on power with your utility provider? In this case, everyone's going to be with Edison. And what does that monthly cost? Well, if we replace that with the generation of a solar system at a kilowatt hour rate that's reduced from the SCE rate, the Edison rate, then you are able to save money on a monthly basis. So you're achieving savings in today's dollars. You're locking in a rate that saves you from the rapidly rising future rate increases of the utility. And then you're also gaining the advantage of having backup power on your home and participating in a community-based solution. So you can choose one of those two methods. Both of them will save you money over the long term. One is a payback method and has a lot of, stipulations associated with it. The other is just a really simple energy as a service model, and it's a positive cash flow model. It saves you money on day one. You don't have any upfront costs, and everything's covered. So it's super easy, simple, high peace of mind.
I can see why that's popular.
Well, we have been busy um, setting up homeowners across the city and the county of Santa Barbara since October of last year. We have signed up about 150 homeowners across the county, and we've been installing homes across the county since early June of this year. So we had a nice long enrollment period, and now we're in an installation period. We're still, of course, enrolling new homeowners, meeting with homeowners on a daily basis. There's a lot of interest, and we're solving really important problems. So it's a really great program to be involved in.
Sounds wonderful.
Well, when you have, this seems like this is a relatively new model. Is that correct? It's always been buy your own panels, is what I remember is how it used to work.
That's right. Purchasing panels and, getting tax credits and or doing some sort of a lease arrangement have been the most typical way to acquire a system up to this point. Both of those require that you either spend your cash or you use a financing instrument that is impacting your debt to income ratio, right? Or you're paying high interest expense. But you now, through the evolution of financial instruments and third-party financing that we are utilizing, we are able to have a no upfront cost solution for the homeowner. And the reason that this really works well for the city, for instance, is that when you look at certain constituents in our city, certain areas do not have access to a system like this. If they needed to get financing, they don't have enough bandwidth in their debt to income ratio to allow them to get more financing, to take on a new loan. Or maybe they've had issues with credit. Maybe if you have had issues with credit, then you have a more challenging time accessing this type of equipment. So with the city, what we've done is we have what's called a reserve fund set up. So every kilowatt hour of power produced from one of our systems has a rate associated with it that homeowners are paying, and a percentage, a very small percentage of all of that goes into this reserve fund. That reserve fund does two key things. Number one, it acts to secure all the equipment on the home instead of a property lien. So you avoid property liens. Number two, it allows for anyone, no matter what their FICO score is, to participate in this program. So that every single homeowner, as long as their home qualifies in terms of being solar ready, can participate in this renewable energy end-to-end storage solution and help the whole community achieve the 100% renewable goal by 2030 that the city has.
That's an amazing goal. It seems like this is a great program. Why doesn't everybody do it that is available for it, meaning with the roof and such?
It's a good question, Jonathan. Not all roofs qualify. So as we talked about, there are some more challenging scenarios. So there's plenty of California shake roofs out there. Like California shake was basically put right on top of like slats, and it avoids the underlayment structure of a roof like a plywood decking. So it's not a up to code current standard for roof. We can't install on that. If you have a asphalt shingle roof that is, 75 to 80% of the way through its useful life, then it will need to be replaced before we can install on it. If you have a clay tile roof, we are going to have to undergo a certain amount of labor in order to prepare that roof to install on it. So there are a certain percentage of homeowners who fall into each one or all, one of those categories. And so there are some other elements that lead to homes not qualifying. In fact, there's a lot of homes that are rented in the area, right? You know, people are renters, they're not the homeowner. And so they may like the idea and the homeowner might like the idea in general, but when the renter is paying the utility bill and the homeowner is not, then there's not a lot of motivation there. It's a problem we're working on solving. So is the roofs. Trying to find a way where we can access some kind of support for roofs would be a fantastic development in this program or in general. There isn't a solution like that right now. So I'm putting it out there, hoping that we can find that at some point.
Roofs are pricey.
They certainly are. We definitely have a couple of roofers we work with. Roofers have been super busy, as you've probably seen.
Yes.
The rains we had last January really opened a lot of homeowners' eyes to the condition of their roof, and it really slowed down the workload of, it delayed a lot of work on the plate of roofers. So for those two reasons alone, there's been a short supply of roofers lately.
Mm-hmm. Where I live, we lose power every now and then. If you have a solar, are you pretty much protected from that, or do you always need backup power?
Very common question, and there's a misperception built into that, right? Like, yes, if you have a solar system, it would seem obvious that it's providing your home with power, an alternative source of power. So if the utility service went off, wouldn't that power continue to give your home the power that it needs? And the answer, unfortunately, is no. If you just have a solar system, for grid safety reasons, when the power grid shuts off, the solar system shuts off. And the power safety reasons have to do, with line workers. If there were line workers in the area, it would be unsafe to have the solar backfeed coming back onto the grid. We're all interconnected to the grid with our systems. So that's why a solar system will not give you that backup power itself. So you do need to have a backup battery, a backup power solution, which would be a backup battery. So the solar system works to power your home during the day and also put power into that battery. So it's storing some of that power that's being generated during the daytime. That battery is going to have a state of charge always maintained, so that if the power grid goes off, we can island your home. We'll have an essential loads panel that the battery starts running, so that you'll have fresh food, you'll have internet, you'll have the ability to charge devices, you'll have the ability to turn on certain lights in your home, so that you have a place to stay safe, you have a place to be entertained, you have a way to communicate. So you'll have essential loads covered. There are a lot of battery options in the market right now that are not backup batteries. They are just load shifting batteries. So that is a partial solution that is being offered by many solar and storage providers. So as a result of some rate changes that occurred with the utility over the last 6 months, that make the battery a critical component for achieving the economic advantage that a solar and battery system has the ability to provide. So when you look at solar and battery without the backup component, you can certainly use the battery to store power during the day, and then you can deploy power from the battery to offset some of your evening and nighttime purchases from the utility. And you can still gain an economic advantage from that. And that's the scenario I'm referring to, but it is only a partial solution. If you want to have the ability to run your home in a power outage, and there are a lot more of these happening now, there are more and more unpredictable events, there are more and more planned power shutoffs. If you want your home to run during those events, you have to have a backup battery, not just a load shifting battery. And our program, the Santa Barbara Home Power Program, includes this backup battery in every system. It is part of the solution. It is not an add-on. It is not an extra. There's not an extra cost. It's covered for the entire 25-year term of the service agreement. It gets replaced or upgraded whenever that's needed, along with all of the other system components.
Oh.
I've certainly noticed more than a few cutoffs in the last year. I don't know quite what's going on out there in the world of the grid, but there's never been so many in my memory.
That's a function of many things, but overall, in general, Scott, we see more of these because the grid is aging and deteriorating. We live in a society where for 100 years, the investor-owned utilities that service 3 main areas in the state of California have had zero competition. They are what are called regulated monopolies. They're governed by the California Public Utility Commission, which is a state government agency, and they are able to impose tariffs and fees at whatever level they desire in order to cover all of their costs. Well, when you leave something like a home unattended for 100 years, it probably needs a lot of work from time to time. So that's what you're seeing is the system has to get turned off from time to time for work to be done. That's one thing that's happening. Another thing that's happening is we have a lack of power relative to demand in the evenings in California. And that is a dynamic from the way the power grid is set up right now. Our generation facilities cannot produce enough power between the hours of 4 and 9 p.m. relative to the amount of power that we have demand for at that time. So whether you're looking at it from a renewable power generation and distribution standpoint or a fossil fuel powered generation and distribution standpoint, that demand and supply gap exists to a certain extent at certain times of the day. And storage, battery power, is one of the solutions for that gap. And that is another reason why the city supports this program. This program puts more storage into the market. That storage is offsetting that demand gap every evening. This is an extension of what you're seeing in other areas of our community. For instance, you know that our schools have had solar arrays placed on top of the parking lots, and they are currently getting retrofitted with batteries so that the schools are resilience hubs where we can go in an emergency to gather, find emergency response, charge devices, communicate with others, and have a central location that has a distributed energy resource in place so that it's not relying on the centralized utility grid. Similarly, we're installing and retrofitting load stations with batteries so that when our single point of failure into this utility service from the backcountry is ever compromised, we have backup power at the load station so that we can then send renewable power that's been stored, or excuse me, just power that's been stored to homeowners so that they will experience fewer outages, and we're prepared for unplanned outages. So our program is an extension of that. It is creating distributed energy resources at the residential level in the neighborhoods. It's localizing power so that it's giving you the control back. It's localizing power so that we can have a transition away from the centralized utility grid system, which is not very reliable anymore.
Yeah. Any last question you have, Scott?
Well, it seems to me like going back to where we started, Tony, was that you can buy a system or you can participate in the system that you're suggesting. I want to go back to the differences of that because it's well, I want your opinion on because that's what people are going to probably have in their minds as they're listening to this. Well, should I go out and buy a system or should I participate in yours? What do you say is the main differences here?
So the main difference when you buy a system is that you're paying upfront money for a depreciating asset. So you're taking on all the opportunity cost, right? So you're basically saying that I don't have a better way of spending this money, right? Whereas if you were to choose the method where you don't have any upfront cost, you're actually keeping all the time value of money on your side. So that goes back to a financial rule that simply states that a dollar is worth more today than it is at any point in the future. So if you can avoid spending today's dollars on a depreciating asset, you have all the time value of money on your side. Now, that's not to say that we don't have some sort of built-in cost adjustments with our program that you need to factor in. For instance, there is an adjustment made every year. There's an escalating rate of 2.9%. So you can simply make some, some assumptions for your own financial situation. Can I invest $50,000 into something where I can earn greater than 2.9%? If you can, then it makes a lot of financial sense for you to make that investment instead of buying a solar system. Along the way, you're avoiding all of the long-term costs of ownership by making that second alternative choice with no upfront costs.
Well, I would think in most people's minds there would be a thought like, okay, I have a $250 a month electric bill. What's this going to do to me? I think that's probably a basic question that people are going to
right. Yeah, that's a great way to look at it, right? And that kind of leads one down the path of the positive cash flow model. If you're spending $250 a month today, you can achieve. Every home is going to have a different situation, going to be a different palette to create the system and design from and have a different output, but you can expect to save somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 to 40% on your monthly utility bill. So if you look at your total cost of power today being $250, you can replace that with a cost that's 10 to 40% lower than that by participating in this program or having a system put on your home that's giving you a monthly option to save money.
I want to have people have a way of contacting you, but I do have one more question, Tony. What for those people not living in Santa Barbara County, like me and a lot of our listeners, how would people find out about programs like this in their area? What would it be called?
First of all, we're expanding our programs beyond just Santa Barbara City and County. We have recently created the similar arrangement with San Luis Obispo. So there's we have what's called our Powered Up San Luis Obispo network. We have our Powered Up Ventura network. We have our Powered Up Goleta and Carpinteria. All of these are the same type of arrangement for homeowners as we have in Santa Barbara. And so the Santa Barbara Home Power Plan is part of the Powered Up network. And you can find information out about any of these particular areas by going to poweredupnetwork.com. And if you were in another region of California, I'd like to say we're coming there soon. We are working on that. We have, our model, our concept, our in-market model has actually been noted as being very unique and aligning the mission of all stakeholders in a way that no other model does. We have access to funding in order to take this program across the state. So we are actively in discussions with other municipal organizations who have strategic energy plans that see the benefit of deploying this solution in the market will provide to complement all of the other resilient components that they have in place.
Great. And if people want to connect with you personally, what's the best way for them to do that?
I'll take your phone call anytime. My phone number is 805-971-1627. 805-971-1627. Look forward to hearing from you.
Yeah, this has been great, Tony. I learned a lot, and I'm glad that this type of stuff is happening. And if people want to get in touch with you, Scott, what's the best way of doing that?
Well, I'm Scott at scottwilliams.com.
And I am Jonathan Robinson, and don't get in touch with me. I already got plenty going on. Anyways, thanks, our listeners. Hopefully that was valuable, and we'll see you next time on Sweet Home Santa Barbara.
Thank you for listening. Please subscribe to our podcast on your favorite app. If you know someone preparing to sell their home, please tell them about the podcast. Visit scottwilliams.com to contact me and download the 2 free e-booklets, Is My House Saleable Now? And How Not to Buy a Money Pit. Thank you for listening.